So what's up, y'all? You're listening to your Mental Matters podcast. I'm your girl Mo Lu. And for those of you watching, thank you for tuning in. Today is a very special episode, at least special to me because we have a special guest. Um, and yeah, you guys may be familiar with her. She is an actress. She is a comedian. She also has her own podcast titled Small Doses. And she was also a former talk show host on, a popular show that, a lot of my folks watch. And without further ado, Amanda Seals.
Hey, hey. What's
Hey,
up?
yes, thank you for joining. Thank you for being here. Um, yeah, this is a mental health podcast. I think really I wanted you to join this podcast and be a part of it because for me, listening to your podcast, you do talk a lot about mental health on your podcast, and I was like, I think it would be fire. It would be dope to just have you come and and that is the crazy part is because from listening to your podcast, you've shared a lot that like, I'm not an expert. Like you've said, like I'm not an expert, like I don't like I'm not a therapist. But a lot of the things that you have shared, I feel like have been like on point with things regarding mental health. Like me, I'm in my master's program right now to become a mental health counselor. I'll be done next year. So, if all goes well and all goes according to plan, I'll be a therapist in 2022. So
All right.
thank you. Yeah. So it's kind of a thing where like in with me listening to you share, I was like, no, like that's on point. Like some of the things that you shared, like I've definitely like I've gone to therapy myself because of course like if you're in the field, you're encouraged to like have your own therapist. And so I think like, like the real situations that you share, like I know like I when I was listening to like your side effects of anxiety episode and side effects of like insecurity and different things you would touch on and share, I was like, that's like, like that's like clinical. Like even though it's like, like that's real stuff. Yes, yes. So definitely give yourself more credit because you know what you're talking about. Okay.
Nice.
So
That makes me
yes.
feel good. All right.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, I think I definitely that's what prompted me to say like, no, Amanda Seals would definitely be, a dope person to have come on. And of course, like from listening, I feel like I've grown to just love you and just love how you share authentically. You don't hold back, like you just share your truth, and it is what it is. Like and that can be scary sometimes. Like I think even, you know, for me, like, I don't want to ramble on, but I think like with just deciding to create a podcast to talk about mental health, I knew like there would be a certain level of like sharing my own experience with mental health and like anxiety and stuff like that I would also be sharing with other people. And so yeah, I think it's just there's a lot of like bravery and courage and just black girl magic, all of that like I get from listening to you. And so yeah, I'm ready to get into it.
Let's get in. Let's get
Yeah.
in.
Yes. So, I mean, I have some, formal questions that I did want to ask you to kind of just, hear your, responses and your viewpoint. And, for those of you who don't know, we're talking about perspective. That's a topic, like perspective with Amanda Seals as it relates to mental health, right? And so, um, yeah, I guess I'll jump into the first question, and then we can go from there. So, currently, how is your mental health?
Mm. um, I would say today I started low and I'm climbing. Um, but I would say as far as like 2021 goes, this is like the first funk I've been in of the year. So it took 19 days. Nice. Uh, um, but I say all that to say though that I think there's sometimes this misperception that says that makes mental health um a correlation between happiness, and it's like you can be mentally healthy and sad, because like there's certain things that naturally would make you sad. You know, so it's like, what am I supposed to, so it's not mentally unhealthy to be anxious when we're like in an anxious time. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's the thing too. Like there's this association that says that if you're mentally healthy, then you're just like chipper and good and everything is like all good all times. And it's like, that's not real. So
Right.
as far as my mental health goes, I think I'm fine, just because I don't feel like I'm off the rails. You know, I don't feel like I'm at a point where I can't wrangle myself back. And that is when I feel like we find ourselves in a mental health like issue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that was good. Yeah, I agree. I agree with that point too. Like definitely, which I don't know if this is an actual term, but I've definitely seen it on Instagram, like the toxic positivity. I probably gotta double check if that's like a real term, but just the idea that like just being extra positive all the time and never being down, never expressing like negative feelings is, like you said, that's not like realistic. So for sure, I agree with that. You can be fine mentally, and because I mean, yeah, we have a range of emotions as humans. So I think it is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that like toxic positivity, like you said, like, I don't know if that's like a technical term, but it definitely is a real thing where you get this messaging that says that like you need to always be like, you know, smiling and chipper and happy, and you know, like you can't like I know for me, like I'm a realist, and I feel like oftentimes sorry
Mm-hmm.
I feel like oftentimes realists get hit with like, oh, you're being negative if you're just calling out like negativity that is existing. You know, like if I call out that there's a possibility that this thing could happen and it may be negative, like I don't think that's me being a pessimist. I don't think that's me wishing for something to happen. It's more me saying like, hey, this is a possibility, so keep your head on swivel type thing. And you know, it's not to say that you're like trying to harness negative energy or that you're somehow rebuking positive energy, but to me it's more so this thing that says that like I'm acknowledging that these things are possibilities, thus I need to like bone up my positive energy, and I need to kind of like be more conscious of like, okay, not getting sucked into like the doubt or the concern. And that type of thing is very like frustrating, because that can definitely make you go into a funk, because it feels like the universe is gaslighting you. When that like toxic positivity, that concept I can totally relate to, because it's like I think there's toxic positivity when it comes to Black films. I'm just like, why y'all acting like every Black movie is a good movie? This is not
Right.
a good movie, and we are not being critical. Like, and if we're
No.
not going to be critical, then it's toxic because it is lowering the bar of our standard. So
Nah, for sure. I'm definitely one of those people. Like, even if the movie was, I'm like, that was kind of trash. I'm like, I'm not gonna say it though, because that's my people. But like, I'm one of those. I'm one of those people.
we gotta be able to say like, yo, like I didn't feel this for this reason. And trust me, it's even harder for me because I'm in the business. So you know that I'm in the business, so I can't like say things because people are like, I'm gonna see them. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yes.
they're here. And I just feel like that's frustrating for me. Because I be wanting to say that shit was trash. I be wanting to say that shit was trash all the time.
How important do you think perspective is in mental wellness?
Well, you know, perspective is truth. And I think that's like a real doozy, right? Because whatever your perspective is your truth. And even if your perspective is flawed, it feels true to you. you know? So that's why depression is such a doozy, because when you're in a depressive state, your perspective can oftentimes be irrational, but it feels real to you. It feels rational to you. And that's like, you know, not easy to, it's damn near impossible for you to tell on the inside that your perspective is irrational, because you're like, this is how I feel, so this is real. And that's why like stuff like therapy ends up being so important. And of course, therapy has many different ways like of existing. There's a bunch of different types of therapy within the clinical space, but then there's also, you know, like Reiki and holistic, you know, holistic spaces, etc. But you just oftentimes need an outside voice to like kind of help affirm, and that can be a little scary for people too, because it's like, damn, that means I gotta trust, you know, I gotta trust somebody. And perspective is very skewed depending on your emotions. I mean, that's just a real deal. If you're sad and you're, you know, like if you're anxious, if you're angry, your perspective on something can oftentimes be skewed. Whereas like if you were in a different emotional state, you might have looked at this same thing and been like, oh, that's nothing.
Right.
You know, so your vantage point, for, you know, is different. So, you know, for all intents and purposes, like when we talk about like stillness and meditation and peace, I feel like that's really about being able to get yourself back to, always get back to like the zero horizon. You know, like it's like we all have like this horizon that is like where we're at our healthiest and we can see things the clearest and at the fullest point. And that horizon can shift depending on where your mood is and who's around. And, you know, and so like the goal is to try and create as few ways in which that horizon can shift. And that's about like doing the work with yourself. And it's not always easy.
Absolutely. No, that's,
I mean, talk about just perspective, like if you haven't dealt with your triggers, if you haven't dealt with your traumas, like your perspective on things is going to be vastly different than someone else who has, you know, just even in the sense of like getting through something like that and seeing the other side changes your perspective on even your own abilities. It changes your perspective on, you know, your faith in yourself or your faith in healing. So then it allows you to even commit more to seeing those things through. So perspective and mental health are one and the same, you know, they really can.
No, absolutely. Yeah. I was, as we were talking too, I was thinking about it because I know like when I first started going to therapy, which that was because I was dealing with anxiety, like it was just progressively getting worse, but I didn't realize that it was. And I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go because like I don't want to derail, right? Like you mentioned, like I want to be able to like make sure that I'm good. I actually my therapist, she, you know, introduced herself to me and was telling me like her background, and she's, you know, her like niche, like what her focus was positive psychology, right? And that helped with like perspective, right? Like that was like the basis, like one of the foundations of it is like helping to like shift the perspective. Because like you were saying too, like if somebody is in a state of like anxiety, like intense anxiety, where they're have chronic anxiety where like every day they wake up and they're anxious, then it's like, yeah, the perspective is going to be different. Like it might just be more like, nope, I feel like, you know, people are at my throat, or I feel like people are like, I just feel it. Like I know. So I think
you're on edge.
Yes.
Yeah. Like, I mean, my anxiety will flare up and I don't even know why, you know, like I've had anxiety for the past like 48 hours. I don't know why. I'm on edge, you know. I'm like, my man is just like, why are we fighting? What are we having an argument about? I'm like, I don't even know. I don't even know, you know. Yeah. And then you have, and then you know, I feel like the work that I've done has allowed me to be better at being able to like step back and see myself and be like, oh, you're not being yourself right now. Something is affecting your horizon. You know what I'm saying? Like something is affecting your perspective. Yeah. And once upon a time, I wasn't able to do that.
Right. Right.
I just get caught up in it, and and then you end up having to do all these apologies later.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. For sure. And I think, yeah, being able to do the work, it's crazy because it's like, I say this all the time, like as human beings, we have more power than we think as far as like over our thoughts and stuff like that. But it's definitely easier said than done. Saying that to somebody who's in the thick of like their anxiety or in the thick of their depression, like it just might go over their heads because they're not even able to really. So, um, yeah, I think for sure, like once you are doing the work, like you mentioned, then it's like, it's easier to shift the perspective. Like I know like early on when my therapist was like, yeah, we have to change this perspective or like we're gonna work on that. I was like, I didn't think
Whatever.
it was possible. And then when I stopped going to her for therapy, it's so crazy to me. After I stopped going to her was when I actually had more like, it's like I left and then it was like I was able to apply and practice all of these like
Yeah, because
shifting.
you had no choice. Because that's
Right.
the other thing too. Like, I feel like you have to take breaks from therapy. Like my therapist will tell me, like, there is such a thing as too much therapy, because you do start kind of like getting into, well, you can start getting into kind of like I wouldn't say necessarily a crutch, but into a rhythm of like, oh, I'm not going to deal with this right now. I'll deal with it at therapy, and then, so then when that's not there, it's like you don't have a safety net. You're the safety net. And that's the whole point of therapy.
Yep.
I stopped seeing a particular therapist because she said to me, my job is to determine whether to deal with something through the mind or the emotion, and your job is to be along for the ride. And I was like, that is absolutely not the case. Like, no, that's not what this is about. Your
Right.
job is to help me increase my tools of doing that for myself.
Yeah.
That's what this is.
Yep.
I also feel like she used to just get caught up in like the soap opera of my relationships. Like I
Yeah.
feel like at a certain point it was like, oh, you just trying to just watch the show.
Right. Right. Did you feel like at any point like she started to feel like your friend?
Yeah, like I feel like she was, well, you know what? Not her as much as I had a therapist before her that I had gone to like 3 visits, and it was the first white woman therapist that I had ever like sought out because she was referred. I went to a therapist one time, a white woman before, but I only went to her like one time, and I didn't go to therapy for like 7 years.
Mm.
But this particular woman, she was lovely, but it definitely felt like she just want to hang out, like
Mm-hmm.
oh, I got a black friend, like that's what she was very like radical like in her thinking, and like I think that she like appreciated just like the fact that I'm a very radical thinker and that I'm about the movement and whatnot. And I think and I realized that like we weren't doing much talking about what's really going on. It was more so like talking about like the blogs, like
Right. Right.
and I was like, oh, I can't do this. But she referred me to a psychic. She referred
Mm.
me to a psychic. I had some theft in my house, and it was between
Mm.
these 2 people. And the psychic was like, "Oh, nah, he didn't do it. She did it. She took it." Like, I mean, she said it to me so matter of fact. It was like, nah. She was like, I mean, he's whack, but he didn't steal your money. That chick stole your money. Her boyfriend stole it. She knows he stole it, and they looked through your diary.
Well, not the diary. What?
But she was so like, she just said it so matter of fact. And and I have some psychic gifts, so I do believe in psychics, but it was just one of those moments where it was like, damn. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I mean, I've definitely had therapists who and that's why like whoever's listening and thinking about going to therapy, like understand like you may have to go through a few folks before you find your fit, and that can be a little frustrating, but it's worth it. Like the therapist that I talk to now, I mean, we've been on and off, but I've been talking to her since 2015.
Mm.
Like she knows me and she's like seen my journey, and she understands aspects of me and I understand aspects of her. Like I know that she's not really good. Like she's too soft on niggas. Like,
Mm.
so I just know that like if we're gonna talk about relationship stuff, she's always going to lean in favor of the dude every time.
Ooh.
So like, I
Okay.
don't necessarily talk about that with her. You
Yeah.
feel me?
Yep.
But like when it's talking about myself and like my own blocks, she's great with helping me to identify them and to point out the ways in which they show up that I didn't even know, and that's what's always kind of like, that's when I'm like, oh, you earning your check today.
That's
Like,
it.
I'm
Right.
like, I had no, and so therapy, I think it's dope that you said that, like, when you would not see her, that it would click in, because it's something about the brain that like needs time to marinate. Like I take tennis lessons, and like we'll be in the lesson and I just will be like struggling. And
Mm-hmm.
then I'll come back the next week, just knock him out the box. And he's
Yeah.
like, no, it marinated. Like, like it just
Right.
needed to get settled in.
Mm-hmm.
So the mind is, fascinating, which I'm sure you know because you study it.
Absolutely. What are some practicals that you, Amanda Seals, use to help overcome anxiety?
The number one is to acknowledge that I'm having the anxiety. So I had to really learn what my anxiety attacks show up as, because for a long time I didn't realize that, like, for me, my anxiety attacks show up as I get sleepy.
Mm-hmm.
I just start yawning, and sometimes it'll just happen out the blue and I don't have an explanation for it. Like, I've found that I started getting anxiety when I drive at night.
Mm.
And I don't know where that came from, because I'm not consciously, like, I'm not afraid to drive at night, but apparently somewhere in my subconscious, it's afraid to drive at night.
Yep.
Like I started to pay attention to when these kind of like these phenomena would happen, which is like a, just kind of this unexplained thing that's happening with your body. Why am I just yawning? Why am I all of a sudden yawning? And then I would have to take a nap, like, immediately. It was like
Mm-hmm.
my nap, like it was like my nap is calling. I was about to sing an R. Kelly song. Or Kelly was, so we're not going to do that.
You do it. I love it.
I will not. But the nap would just like wrestle me to the ground. And then it was actually during COVID that I had one of those moments where I was just like, oh my God, I gotta sleep. And then I was like, oh, you're having an anxiety attack.
Mm.
And I like forced myself to get up, to go outside. And like, I have like a boxing, like, punching bag thing outside, and I like started punching the punching bag. And like, so one of the ways that one of the next ways that I deal with it is to get active. Once I've identified it, is to get active in like combating it. So like, let's say I have it while I'm driving. Of course I'm not going to pull over and hit a punching bag, but
Right.
I will like take deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
Because obviously something is not calm. So let me try and calm it down,
Yeah.
But you know what I will tell you? Oftentimes just acknowledging it, like just saying like, oh, I'm having an anxiety attack, like immediately starts pulling me back from it.
Yeah.
Because it's like I've gained control over it somehow. Whereas in the past, I didn't have any control, it just was like, oh, I'm being taken by this thing and I don't know why. And, learning how the anxiety attack shows up, because those are kind of those ones that I described are like that, like, related to like specific kind of like activities, right?
Mm.
But what do you do when it's related to a person, or it's related to a feeling? Like, you go through a breakup, you're going to have all types of anxieties going on, right? Like,
yep.
And those anxieties can play with your mind, and they trick you into thinking. Like, I just distinctly remember this moment with my ex where I woke up and I was just overcome with like, no, like, this is wrong. Like, we are supposed to be together.
Mm.
No, you weren't. No, this is anxiety. This is fear that's actually like fucking with your perspective.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the tools then to be able to see like, see this right here? This is not your real emotions. This is fear.
Yeah.
So like, go put your phone in the freezer or some shit. Like, you know? So, but ultimately, you know, it comes down, all of those things are about just being truthful with yourself. And that's why when we talk about the work is really just being truthful with yourself and having to admit that you may have fears. And for a lot of people, that's something that's hard for them to admit, you know, because they feel like they're weak or they're a simp if they admit to that, you know, or even just admitting to themselves that they are reacting outside of their consciousness. Then that also makes people feel weak, because it's like, nah, like I'm in control of my mind. It's like, sometimes you may not be. You know, there's things that happen in your life that create chemical reactions that you simply just don't have control over yet, you know? So it's a lot. And the work is like, you know, you got to go back into your childhood and you got to like see things and identify things that are uncomfortable or that may just feel like, I mean, I've heard so many stories of people having to go back to childhood and be like, oh shit, I was molested. Like, and they, you know, for their own protective means, their brain just had packed that away differently, you know? But it didn't mean that it wasn't still baggage that they were carrying. It was just masked, you know? It was like this duffel bag stuffed in a Louis Vuitton suitcase. And so it felt like it was some other thing, but when you opened it, it was like, Pandora's box.
Yeah. No. There was so much gems in there. I was like, oh, which one? Like, there were so many things that came to me as we were talking. I'm like, yes. I think even, everything you said, yes. And I think too, like in regards to what you were talking about with the breakup too, I think like what came to my mind, at least for me, like sometimes even like anxiety can come about in regards to like just the separation. Like, it's like, okay, you've been so used to a particular person and this normalcy, and now like detachment. And it's like, how? Like, now I got to figure out how to maneuver and operate without them, that can bring up anxiety, especially like you said, with childhood. Some people, if they have like abandonment issues, then it's like, oh my gosh, this feeling is here, ever present.
That is me all the way. And like, and it's separation anxiety is such a weird thing once you identify it, because you're just like, oh my gosh, I have this in so many areas of my life. Like, you're just like, I mean, separation anxiety can show up in, okay, like you just described, a breakup, right? You know that person's not good for you. You know that person's not supposed to be with you, etc. The separation anxiety is still going to happen because you're separated. So whether or not they should leave is completely separate from the feeling that you have that they're leaving. That right there is a mind fuck that you have to like figure out, right? Then there's like, so I know I have like a real big reaction when people switch up on me. So, and it can happen like whether they switch up in a conversation or whether they switch up just in behavior. Like like I notice it affects me, it makes me uncomfortable and uneasy. That's separation anxiety, because it's a separation from the pattern. Learning stuff like that about myself was like, what? You know, and being able to explain that to somebody, you know, like I had a homeboy and I had to tell him straight up, like, we can't really be tight like that because you're so inconsistent. And I'm built the way my whole shit is set up. I just can't manage that. And it's not, and I shouldn't have to, for all intents and purposes, right? Because your inconsistency is really just you not being grounded. But no love lost, but it's just like, I can't keep allowing myself to be attached to someone who is so just dissonant, because my separation anxiety gets triggered, and that's just an uncomfortable feeling that I don't want to feel.
Yep. On point. I agree. I concur for sure. Similarly, I'm the same way. It's just like, and also I know like I'm not that way, which not to say everybody got to be the way you are, right? But it's just like, as far as in relationship, like if I rock with you, I rock with you, and you're going to get consistency from me, you know? So it's like, why is it not
Well, it builds trusts, really,
Right.
business builds trust. And the thing about trust is that trust builds obligation and responsibility. So I think a lot of people, even if it's inadvertently, they don't want to have to feel that feeling of obligation and responsibility that comes with someone now trusting you.
Right. Ooh.
So.
Ooh.
And again, it's not like they're necessarily like, I'm doing this on purpose, but like that's what fuckboys are doing. That's what fuckboys are doing. Like they don't want to build trust because with that comes obligation and responsibility, and they do not want to feel obligated or responsible.
Yep.
So that's why, like, that's the number one sign of a fuckboy is disregard of your time and consideration. That is consistency, and that builds trust. And they're like, don't trust me.
That part. But some of them will turn around and be like, trust me. And then they show you, they'll be like, nah, trust me, I got you. And then they don't.
Which is why it's all about actions,
Right.
You know what? Actually, let me take that back. It's all about synergy of actions and words. Like I know for me, like again, my anxiety gets triggered when I feel like there isn't a synergy between action and words. When I start feeling like someone is saying something but doing something different than what they're saying, that plays with me. And it can happen in the sense that, like, I remember dating somebody who he would always be saying to me, like, I don't really want to be in a relationship. Like, I'm just trying to, like, like we're just friends, like we're just cool, right? But then in his actions, you've been in my house for 4 days. So it's a mind fuck, and it's like it's not aligned, and that inevitably is going to like chip away at you. And so that's why, like, they always say, like, you need to give people at least 3 months to really show you who they are in a relationship, because that's going to really determine, like, are they aligned, or were they just kind of saying what needed to be said in that moment because that's how they were feeling in that moment. And even after 3 months, it's just humans we are very complex, and we do not know anything about ourselves. Like, I just feel like most of us really don't know anything about ourselves.
Yep. We're learning as we go. And I feel like, I mean, yeah, I think if you look at it that way too, because I think, like me, I definitely feel like I went through a lot of like transformation recently within the past, like, I want to say maybe few years, where I had to like relinquish control. Like, not to say like, I don't think I'm a controlling person, but I do like to feel like I'm in control. I do like, and so like, I realized like, wow, the more you try to like be in control, the more stressed you are. So like, how about you just say like you're complex and you're learning as you go and grow, and it is what it is, because I think that's the only way like we'll really get through this life. If we're like, no, it has to be this way, it just gets harder. At least from my experience, it's just been difficult whenever I've been like, nope, this is what needs to happen. When it's not happening that way, I'm like,
you're out of sorts. You're just like, how am I supposed to manage this if it's not going to do what I want it to do? And it's like,
yep,
you gotta just lay off and take naps. Like,
yes, naps.
I say that, and I know it may sound like a joke, but it really is, because just like you said about how, like, when you stepped away from your therapist, it like sunk in. It's like your body, when you take a nap, is giving your body a chance to just like recalibrate. That's why they tell you to shut your computer down every night. It's giving it a chance to just like rest, recalibrate, let things settle in, let your neurons form, and your mind continue to rewire. And when you just keep going, it just doesn't give it a chance. That's why, like, literally with electronics, sometimes you just got to like set this shit down for a little bit.
Yes.
And then it'll work. And you're like, but why? And it's like, because it's been functioning and functioning and functioning and functioning, and it just needs a rest to recalibrate. And let me tell you, and to your point about like letting go, I know for me, I used to not want to take naps because of FOMO. I used to feel like if I take a nap, I miss some shit, I'm gonna miss out on some shit. And it's like, what's gonna happen, Amanda? What's gonna happen? Like, take a nap, wake up, you're gonna feel better. I learned once I started doing stand-up comedy, that I got over that, because when you have a set at 1:30 a.m., you gonna take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
would get fully dressed, do all my makeup, everything, and then just like sleep like Regina King and Friday. Take a quick 30 and be like, all right, let's go tell some jokes.
Ready. That's it. Okay. So, another question. What makes you feel your very best mentally?
Nature. Like being out in nature, being especially like at the beach, like that's really like something about the open space. And resolutions. Like I love, like there's always gonna be times where you have like conflict with people, or some type of like uneasiness. And I just love when resolution happens, because it gives me the extra boost of feeling like, oh, I can let go and things are still going to be okay.
Yeah. Absolutely. When you say resolutions, is this like in general? Is it like in relationship, friendship? Like
across the board, because like in business, you'll have times where like, things just don't go your way, or things just are like not lined up and you're just like on edge. And the fact that things can get resolved. I mean, I know that there was a lot of time in my life where I felt like I was always like trying to like kind of force things through. And when I say like a resolution, I just mean taking that deep breath and finding a way through that that's like with ease. That always helps with my mental health, because it's kind of like allows me to drop my shoulders.
Yeah.
And not be like in my head. Because that's what happens a lot. I'm just like in my head, like, okay, I gotta do this. I'm trying to figure out how to do this. How can we do that? And it just can be taxing.
Yeah. When you are in a negative headspace or don't have a positive perspective, how do you handle that?
Like I said before, like I will try to do some type of physical activity or take deep breaths. If it's a scenario where I can step away without it seeming like I'm abandoning the situation, then I try and do that. Sometimes that's not the case. If you're in like a conversation with somebody or a discussion with somebody and, you feel like I just need to step away. Like sometimes that can exacerbate the issue, right? Because it feels like a point for dismissal. But ultimately it's just really trying to, if I'm in a negative headspace, like trying to just not let it consume me. And so
what does a negative headspace look like for you also? Not to cut you, but what does that feel like or look like?
Like defeatist. You're just like, I just can't figure anything out. Everything is just whack.
Okay.
Like it's very uninspired. It's very just like, whatever. Like I'm over it.
Okay.
And typically it doesn't last a long time, but when I'm in it, it feels like it's going to last forever. So,
yeah.
So I try to like catch it as early as possible and like watch positive, like funny stuff or lighthearted stuff, listen to different kind of music, talk to people, and not necessarily talking to them about that, but just like getting outside of my head. And what also has become very helpful is like just writing it down and like getting it out of my brain and onto a piece of paper somehow like create some distance from the issue. So that's been like a thing that I've been utilizing recently. But I want to say this though, I feel like a lot of folks deal with mental health in a varying amount of ways and just don't admit it. And it really is like just a normal thing.
When dealing with insecurities, do you find shifting your perspective helpful? Like what helps you to manage your insecurities?
I try to like really just focus on things that I actually know to be true, like about myself, things I love about myself. And ways in which I can undo those insecurities. Like, for all intents and purposes, our insecurities are quite often things that we've conjured up, or lies that we've allowed ourselves to believe.
Yeah.
Like when I was in high school, these two boys, I overheard them talking about my feet, and they're like, Amanda's got caveman feet. And so that became like an insecurity for years. For like 3 years, I wouldn't wear flip-flops. I wouldn't wear open-toe shoes. Like, it was a whole thing because I had allowed myself to believe that I had caveman feet. And it was like, and my mom would like put together these like baskets of like foot like stones and foot oils and all these things, like, love your feet. And I just had developed this thing. And I mean, it came down to me just realizing, like, no, you don't.
Right.
Like,
right.
That's it. Like, you don't have
Period. Period.
So, all right, and we're back. And also, and even if I did, like, they're mine, whatever. Like, and that's the other part, like, just learning to love. And I mean, there's this kind of journal called Burn After Writing, and it asks you like all these questions just about like your perspective and your life and your youth. And one of the things it asked last night when I was reading it was, what's one thing that you would change about like your growing up? And I said I would change giving so much power to the opinions of people that don't matter.
Yes.
So often our insecurities are drawn from that.
Absolutely. But it takes that shift, like you said, just speaking, whether it's affirming yourself, whether it's saying whatever. It don't matter. It ain't stopping to check.
Affirmations are real. And I used to not believe in affirmations, but they really do make a difference, and they really can like really rewire your perspective in a way that allows you to like get healing from within. Like, absolutely. I look at affirmations are like mental workouts, like it sometimes can be heavy lifting also because you're like, this is corny, but that shit works, yo. And just to be honest, think about how many folks are in the mirror, they don't even know what they're doing, but they're affirming themselves into believing bullshit. So, and they are killing it. I know so many dudes who would tell you like, yo, I used to look myself in the mirror every day like, you the coolest nigga out. You that. Knowing full well, like, you don't got no reason to believe any of those things.
Right, because you real life whack. You're whack.
So, you know what? If you're actually speaking a truth, imagine how effective it can be.
Yes. No, for sure. And just to end off, in light of like affirmations, what is a mantra that you like or that helps you to shift your perspective, that helps you to feel more positive, more uplifted, that helps your mental?
I am protected. All is well. I am protected. All is well. I will tell myself that over and over and over and over again. Because what that means for me is like everything is happening the way it's supposed to. And you don't have to you can't fix whatever you're like. It's not that I can't fix, but like whatever needs to get fixed will come from you. You're protected. Like you have guides, you have ancestors, you have energy, like you are tapped in, like you are protected. All is well. It brings me the calm of knowing that I'm only destined for good things. That's the other one I be telling myself all day.
I love it.
I'm destined for good things. I will not even receive. I am only destined for good things. I will not even receive this. I'm only destined for good things. I am only destined for good things. Like, y'all can cut that shit out. I'm only destined for good things. Hold on to this. I'm only destined for good things.
Yes, that's it. Period.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. This was great.
Thank you for having me, and keep up the good work. And
thank you so much.
And congrats and good luck on getting your degree. And we need as many Black women in this field as possible. So glad to see that you're joining the ranks.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay safe.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Bye, sis.
Bye.